But you have to wonder if the Justice Department is considering whether there is some political solution to this criminal problem, whether part of the issue here is not just that Trump has committed crimes, but that Trump has committed crimes and plans on being back in the White House. Do they consider, as part of a potential plea offer, something that would proscribe him from running for office again? I don't know.
Oops, you're not supposed to say that part out loud there. But Rachel Maddow just told you exactly what this comes down to. We'll be back in about 30 seconds, folks. Got a lot of clips to play today. Get your questions in. Free Will and Friday. Laura's going to grab them. I know there's a lot to talk about.
How much you want to bet that I can get you back inside your head? Before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. And now here's your host, Rich Barris.
So we've crossed the Rubicon now for the second time. The Biden Justice Department under it has Trump on 7 counts, including the Espionage Act. Why the Espionage Act? Since this is a Presidential Records Act violation. Because there is no criminal application of the Presidential Records Act, and that certainly wouldn't allow you to keep off the ballot. So at the end of the day, I'm not a lawyer here, folks. Today I want to talk about the political implications of this and what this means. Let's play a couple of clips, and I think I want to take this in a different direction. All right. Let's first tee up Pete Hegseth and listen to what he said, and then let's just get to the bottom of this.
But if they can get Trump, it means they can get you, they can get me, they can get all of us. He is standing in the way, and that can sound like a campaign slogan, but it's very true. So he disrupted everything they were up to, and they know a second term of Trump is the overturning of the table, the exposing of everything they've done. Sean, I was on your program the night that Alvin Bragg brought the indictment as well. And I remember saying, and I'll say it again, I mean, this is a terrible night for our Republic and our Constitution and our justice system. But as it pertains to the Republican primary, Republicans will rally around Donald Trump. I think every single Republican nominee should be down in Miami on Tuesday night, standing for justice in the country, saying, hey, I may be running for president. Mike Pence, Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, whoever, Ron DeSantis. But this is injustice. This should not stand. Now, I don't think they have a chance now, considering what Trump is up against. This will only strengthen him. But it's not about Trump. It's about our system. And he's been willing to expose it. They've targeted him. And this will only serve to rally voters behind him, Sean, in the Republican nominee process, because they realize what's at stake. Everything Mark Levin laid out, everything Greg Jarrett laid out, everything all the lawyers laid out beautifully is the fragile nature of our republic. And Donald Trump has said, I will expose it. I will take it on. I will take the arrows. And they're sending the entire weight of the federal government against him. And if they can do that, they can do it to all of us. That's what's at stake. And that's why I think it makes him stronger as a nominee.
Two things. One, will the voters rally around him, and will the politicians rally around him, is two different questions. One, what Rachel Maddow said. She is plugged in, man. Rachel Maddow is plugged in. So what she is saying, damn well better believe, is exactly what they are thinking. Here's the problem with what Rachel Maddow said.
They always do that. They do that. And other people would do it, but they do it pretty much better than others.
Is there anything they could throw at you legally that would convince you to drop out of the race? If you get convicted in this case in New York,
no, I'd never drop out. No, I'd never drop. It's not my thing. I wouldn't do it.
So if you've learned anything about Donald Trump over the last 6-7 years, maybe you didn't know the man before, and his entrance into politics is the first time you really introduced him outside of just knowing there's a name in gold somewhere all over the place that you've seen before. If you've learned anything, it's that the man is not going to quit the race. And at this point, he's fighting for his life, which is what I want to get to next. What voters are going to do and react, and how they're going to react, is not the same. Because Pete Hegseth made a good point. However, let's deal with the reality of this. And the reality is Mike Pence and Ron DeSantis, not even so much Nikki Haley, but certainly Mike Pence and Ron DeSantis, and Youngkin has also been making a pitch. If Ron DeSantis falls on his face and I get into this race, he absolutely has the same strategy. And this is the reality we need to just confront right now, because all these cute little cliches we've heard, all right, all fall by the wayside when you look at comments like you saw from Ron DeSantis and Mike Pence. The fact of the matter is, they not only don't care about this indictment, they are banking on this indictment and other indictments. They would not have run if it wasn't for the high likelihood that Donald Trump would be indicted. And in fact, DeSantis in particular, Mike Pence definitely as well, but DeSantis in particular has been running everywhere, and his surrogates have been pitching to donors this exact scenario. And if you did not believe me before about that, go look at his statement. This is so horrible. That's why you should vote for me. That's his response. And just a few days ago, folks, it's Friday. From the weekend on to the last 3 days, they have been calling to reassure people, oh my God, he's at 50% in California. Did you see the PPIC poll? I thought we had a strategy in California. If he takes 50%, he's going to take all the delegates anyway. It won't matter. So much for the Congressional District California strategy. Tell me something to make me feel better. I gave you a lot of money. Don't worry, he's going to be indicted. It is sad, but it's got to be told because it's the truth. And last night, his surrogates were downright giddy on Twitter. One of them, who shall not be named, immediately took to a Twitter space. Yes! Yes! Asa Hutchinson, press release. He's going to have to drop out. He's not going to drop out. And without a doubt, what Rachel Maddow was saying was a hat tip to the defense. It was a wink to the defense that if you maybe approach Jack Smith with this idea, okay, I'll get out of the race, I will stop pursuing the presidency if you drop all these charges and stop coming after me. That's what Rachel Maddow was doing right there on Lawrence O'Donnell. Because Rachel Maddow is the mouthpiece for the administrative state on the left. She absolutely is. She was a predominant pusher of the Russia collusion hoax. Every day the walls were closing in. Every day. So not only are you not going to see other candidates rally behind him, because that's a load of crap, they want this indictment. They want this and more. Yeah, they're like sharks swimming around, smelling blood in the water. But he's not going to quit the race. And at this point, I can't tell you how many donors, people in the game, since last night I've gotten text messages to, how do we move forward from here? The only way to move forward is total victory. That's the only way to stop this. I feel like, and by the way, one of these people just entertained Nikki Haley. Was in fact still, never mind. Nikki Haley today, DeSantis tomorrow. Because the donors that go through the motions, they meet everyone. They like to shake everybody's hand. A lot of these donors want to meet everybody and shake everybody's hand. And this is crazy. Electing any one of these other people is taking an L. It's taking it not even on your knees. It's taking it on all fours. You got down on all fours, bent over, and let them you. Some other replacement candidate not only would not fix these problems, because let's be honest, if you're banking on this, then how much about your core, the principles of who you are, what does that tell you about who people are? If they're actually banking on this to happen, would they be so vehemently opposed to it, or would they just keep a few people around maybe in case they feel like those tactics will work for them when they need it? Anyone who's banking on this to happen as a political strategy is putting their own political ambition above the soundness of the republic. And I'll tell you something. I got a clip I want you to play because I'm looking at this. It's for the lawyers to hatch out, and we may have some come on, and it was really last minute, but we'll see. I'm not a lawyer, so I'll stay in my own lane. I will tell you, Jack Smith, this is actually not new for him. He tried to prosecute John Edwards, couldn't get an indictment. He tried to prosecute Bob McDonnell, by the way, after Bob McDonnell won Virginia by 20 points, and everyone got scared that he was going to challenge Barack Obama. They opened up the investigation on him. He wasn't indicted until, I believe, 2014. And ultimately, the Supreme Court eviscerated him and his case 8-0. But not after they destroyed Bob McDonnell, a very popular Republican governor of a state that was once Republican and had just turned blue. What a surprise. What a coincidence. And as Nancy Mason, Elise Stefanik have been saying since last night, there are no coincidences. They just walked into a skiff and looked at documents showing Joe Biden took a $5 million bribe. And then Jack Smith gets these indictments. The reporter goes up to Joe, and uses Nancy Mason's comments and says, what do you make of this, Joe? He says, where's the money? Like a wise guy. Because his Ukrainian pals were just laughing and mocking the Republican Congress across the Atlantic. It'll take them a decade to find the paper trail. We have shell companies on top of shell companies on top of shell companies. And they're never going to find the money in time. Not that they won't find the money, but they'll just never find it in time. All while this FBI, which I told you is a criminal organization, and the Justice Department is like the Don of all the capos at the FBI. All the while, they've been trying to hide this from Republicans who are actually trying to do their job in Congress, which I know Congress on both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats, have forgotten that their job is oversight, not playing footsies with these people under the table. And now here they are attempting to do oversight, and they got to threaten Christopher Wray with contempt in order to be able to walk into a skiff, not even get the documents, but walk into the skiff to read them. Unbelievable. The FBI actively participated in, and the Justice Department actively participated in a conspiracy to frame Donald Trump when he first won the presidency, and then sort of evolve that investigation into what can only be described as a coup when he was the sitting president. And you would think after John Durham releases this over 300-page report, absolutely condemning them for the crooks they are, they would watch their behavior a little bit. All these people who say Donald Trump is such a threat to the institutions that bind us are destroying the institutions. Projection, Laura. Projection. That's all these people do. He colluded with the Russians. Actually, the only one who colluded with the Russians was the FBI and Hillary Clinton. Igor Danchenko was the source of all that crap. And who fed it to him? Christopher Steele, a guy MI didn't even know was loyal to Britain still or not. He sat at the Russian desk. People in the biz didn't even know whether or not the man was compromised anymore, whether he was trustworthy. That's who Christopher Steele is. You never heard about that. His allegiances were questioned by the people who go to work with the man. And he launders information from Russians into the government. They use it as an excuse, even though they know full well it's a scam. They use it as an excuse to go after the man the first time, which is why all this said and done. I want to play a clip first. Mark Levin went on like a 7-minute tirade, and then look, the great one, Mark Levin, has gone off on some rants before. But this rant, I literally debated whether or not I should play you all 7 minutes for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. If you haven't, you should. I got a minute out of it because I really think it's worth playing after another clip to lead into this. Because I'm telling you, everything this man has gone through, the ruling class, the political class, the media class, none of these people can understand how or why these voters stick with this man. And I put a thread up on Twitter and on Locals everywhere eventually yesterday, but I think first it was on Locals. I wrote it thinking about making it an article. And ironically, Chris Christie I used to illustrate my point because it really shows you how much they just don't get it. These voters are going to look at this man and say he's literally spending his rest of his natural life in a federal prison, all because he stood up for me. Why on earth would I choose Ron DeSantis? Why on earth would I choose Chris Christie? And why on earth, of all people, would I choose Mike Pence? Who, by the way, I have to just point this out. Mike Pence is a filthy liar. All right. Normally, I like to look, and I'll always poll the guy fairly. It's not like I'm polling his 10 voters unfairly right now. But I have to tell you, my own personal experience. Turning Point USA had me come and give a speech in Tampa just days before January 6th. And Mike Pence told every one of us backstage before he then went on stage and told the whole crowd, right, Laura? If you got a mic, better buzz in. Looked at everybody standing around, told all those young activists that he was absolutely going to use his power as vice president, which obviously he had, otherwise they would never have passed that law denying him the ability to challenge electors. And he said that they were going to reject every single fraudulent elector. They had, Laura, please jump in.
They're going to fight and never give up.
We're going to fight, and we need to get the exact
till the end, too.
Because what he said backstage, everybody, is what he very, very close, almost verbatim, what he said when he got on stage and told it to like thousands of people with news cameras around. He was lying. He is a liar. Everyone knows what really happened, which is that he then brokered a deal to play the role of Judas. Or Benedict Arnold. And at the very last minute, he released that bogus letter. When just days before, he was telling everybody, oh, I indeed do have that power. He got punked. His ambition got the better of him, and he betrayed everybody. That's the truth. And there are dozens of lawmakers who know this is true because they were all on board with the plan as well. They just ran for the hills when what happened on January 6th happened. Everybody got scared and everybody abandoned the plan. But the plan was, in fact, in place, and Mike Pence, in fact, signed onto it. Charlie Kirk, you should be the first one telling everybody this. You know damn well what I'm saying is true. You were 10 feet away. He then went around the curtain at your event and told everybody at the microphone what he said backstage. He's a liar. There is no way the man's going to get anywhere near the hearts and minds of the Republican voter. This is a ridiculous joke. So people always ask me, well, Rich, what are they thinking, Rich? What do they think? I actually think Chris Christie had a and listen, hat tip to whoever's TikTok this is who took this. So I saw multiple accounts being shared. I wanted to get the original person so I can give them credit for it, but I ultimately couldn't find it. And I'd be happy to retroactively give it to you, but it's a 38-second clip, and I could not find the actual originator of it. But people should go to locals if they're not there already. Trump indictment and potential Republican fracture is the name of the post I'm referencing right now. But it's basically, now that the charade is over, the charade I've been telling you about for over a year, if the polls don't radically change and the voter sticks with Trump, which I, at this point, think that is what's going to happen, then the Republican Party could end up fractured. There is still a likelihood there. If the polls do change still, or they manage to throw Trump off the ballot, the Republican Party will almost assuredly end up fractured. Worse than 1992. This party divorce will make 1992 look like a lover's spat. This will be far more extreme and far more significant because these voters are not going to take the L. They're not going to obey. They're not going to just get behind the replacement, especially when they find out what everyone's going to find out. And most people have already begun to figure this out. That the non-Trump candidates not only expected this to happen, they're cheerleading for it right now. They need it. It's their only viable path forward to remove him from the ballot. So let's play Chris Christie because actually, again, let's take something Chris Christie said to use as an explainer. These people just don't get it. Let's roll it.
How will you win over Trump voters who are so attached to one charismatic man, considering you don't seem to be appealing to the larger Republican voters? Thank you.
Well, I'm not nearly as pessimistic as you are. There is no such thing as Trump voters. He doesn't own them. He didn't take title to them. They're not one of his buildings. They're not one of his failed casinos in New Jersey. Okay? They voted for him. By the way, I voted for him twice. Okay? Am I a Trump voter then? Hell no, man.
I gotta laugh real quick at the failed casinos in Atlantic City thing. Like, Atlantic City had a resurgence and attempted recovery and comeback. Anyone who lives in New Jersey knows what I'm about to say is true. It actually failed under Chris Christie. He actually oversaw the complete collapse of that revitalization program. And that lost businessmen like Donald Trump, who tried to help bring it back, a lot of money. And Donald Trump is, in truth, not the only one. The truth is, federal prosecutors like Chris Christie removing the mob from Atlantic City was the end of Atlantic City. Because then in moved the drug dealers, in moved the ghettos, and the whole place just collapsed. Nobody wanted to go there. Nobody felt safe anymore. That's the dirty little secret. Federal prosecutors destroyed Atlantic City, or at least started the ball rolling on it. But he says there's no such thing as a Trump voter. This is how disconnected this man is. This is probably why he enters a race 2 weeks after his home newspaper publishes a poll showing that not only is he down to Donald Trump in New Jersey, he's down 50 points with Trump at 70%. They're all just wrong. And Chris Christie is right and knows better. A state he once won over John Corzine, a deeply corrupted Democratic governor, by about 4 points, but then won re-election by 20 points in a very blue state, doing it by winning a ton of Hispanic voters doing it by winning 20-something plus percent of African-American voters. And in New Jersey, for those who know, if you're like me and you're from the tri-state area, you know how that's done. That is not done by knocking on doors or winning them over. It's done by bribing, bullying, or cutting deals with precinct bosses and union leaders and other people that are in control of a ton of votes in a get-out-the-vote machine. And Christie, he played the game right. Look, he probably did close down that bridge. I don't know. But that's how you have to. I didn't even fault him for it at the time, because that's how you have to play the game of politics in a state like that. It's totally machine. Otherwise, they'll eat you up and they'll spit you out. So, you know what? He played it how, and I never fault him for it. He played it how you have to play it if you want to survive, let alone succeed. And yet now, in that very same state, he's getting his fat ass kicked by 50 points. What does that tell you? You must live in a bubble. He doesn't own them, but there is such thing as a Trump voter, Trump voters, and only Trump voters. He just doesn't understand. He has no connection to real voters, so he doesn't get it. In order to really understand it, you have to break down what is a Trump voter. And their loyalty doesn't come from ownership. It comes from mutual admiration, mutual respect. From Donald Trump being a man who lived a billionaire's lifestyle, who threw himself into this game, all at the expense of his own wealth, reputation, to defend them. And he has earned their loyalty. They're not going to leave him for Chris Christie or Ron DeSantis or anybody else. How big is that block, and what are they made up out of? There's two groups of Trump voters, if we're to be as broad as possible. One, these are mid to high propensity voters. They vote all the time, or at least they vote a lot. May miss a midterm here and there, but haven't missed many presidential elections. And after Mitt Romney, they had it. They got so disillusioned. They're Republicans or independents who are Republican leaning, maybe even some conservative Democrats that cross the aisle, but now probably it's the ones Parnell and I have talked about. But that group actually too, Sean Parnell, who came on Wednesday, that group actually is part of group 2 as well. But these are people who absolutely hate their own party. They agree with them in principle and on paper. But in practice, their party betrays them over and over and over. Their so-called favorable media outlets like Fox News told them time and again, John McCain is the only viable candidate. Mitt Romney is the only viable candidate. We need John Boehner. Don't give John Boehner a hard time. Paul Ryan's a consensus candidate. He's going to get stuff done. Only to every time they turn around, get stabbed in the back. They are never going back. They are never going back. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Why would I take a cheap imitation over the real thing? I've been screwed too many times. That's what these voters tell us. The second group, low to mid propensity. They do not vote all the time. In fact, many of them completely gave up on the political process. Others are new, but only are new voters because of the Trump movement, because of MAGA, and because of the man himself. They would never have given the Republican Party a second look under somebody's leadership like Mitt Romney, under somebody like Chris Christie, under somebody like Mike Pence. And frankly, DeSantis is still just a politician. If DeSantis was a representative in the U.S. House, as he was, and there was no Trump movement, but somehow, even without Donald Trump, he managed, because hell froze over, to beat Adam Putnam, who was kicking his all over Florida until Trump endorsed him and gave him the nomination. If somehow somebody like that Ron DeSantis would have somehow defied the laws of nature and nature's God and physics itself and beaten Adam Putnam, he would still just be Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida. Nothing inspirational about it. Nothing MAGA about it. And he would have attracted exactly 0 of these voters in Block 2 that we're talking about. He'd just be another politician, just another Republican. And frankly, these people can't stand the Republican Party. They can't stand any party. They wouldn't even vote if it wasn't for Donald Trump. They only vote Republican if and when they vote because Donald Trump is on the ballot. There are millions of them. There are over 300,000 of them in Minnesota alone. So if we're to assume that Trump is taken out through lawfare, as these opponents of his have assured donors over and over again will in fact happen, the vast majority, if not 90+% of these voters will never vote for the replacement candidate because they have no rational policy reason to do so. What the hell is a rational policy choice? Some people are unfamiliar with that term. Black voters are not stupid. Black voters are not all the other words traditional Republicans have attempted to paint them as for voting Democrat, even though their lives have not gotten any better. They're making a rational policy choice in what they believe is in their own best interest to vote Democratic because those are the only relationships they have. Better to go with the devil you know than the devil you don't. These voters are also making and would make a rational policy decision to either A, vote third party if they did vote, or B, not vote at all. But they sure as hell are not going to vote for the replacement candidate that was banking on Donald Trump being indicted so they could win a nomination. Even in the state of Florida, there are more than twice as many voters who say that they would not vote if Ron DeSantis is the nominee than there are who say that same very thing if Donald Trump is the nominee. That's his own home state. How many do you think there are in Michigan? How does Donald Trump carry Macomb County, Michigan, when no other Republican can do it? Sean Parnell and I were just talking about this on Wednesday in Pennsylvania. In Western Pennsylvania, how does Donald Trump keep getting 40% in Allegheny when other Republicans get in the high 20s and low 30s? How does he keep doing that? How does he keep doing this in northwestern Wisconsin? Because he is the first Republican presidential candidate to carry that state since 1984, a state that even rejected Herbert Walker Bush in 88 and voted for Michael Dukakis. How does he keep getting in the 40s in Ashland, in Bayfield, and in Douglas, in lumberjack country? Because of these voters. That's how. And as Barnes and I have said a million times, even if you can get some of Group 2 to come out without Donald Trump on the ballot, there's no guarantee at all that they will vote Republican. In fact, obviously, many of them did not. And what do we get from the other candidates when we talk about these voters? Ridicule, disdain, mocking. Saw it the other day. Somebody who was on Twitter. And I feel like, I don't know if this woman just has no other time on her hands other than to be on Twitter, but the DeSantis surrogate goes after him. You voted for Obama twice. Exactly. You need voters who voted for Obama to win an election. You can't win on Republicans alone because there aren't enough of them. Even independents, not enough. You need these voters. How do you think Scott Walker initially won the governor's race and then won a recall? Because voters who voted for Barack Obama twice at the presidential level voted for Scott Walker. So you mock these people? Why is it a rational policy decision? Very, 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 very simple. Their lives do not get better under other Republican administrations. In fact, when we're talking about the non-white group in states like Nevada, who said, I don't know, I voted for Biden. I kind of screwed up. I would vote for Trump this time, and I am going to vote. But maybe if I go out, I'll vote for Adam Laxalt. But then he doesn't go out. He doesn't vote. And Adam Laxalt underperforms. Why? Because the man is Hispanic. And nobody got hit harder than in the Bush financial crisis that, yes, Bush is responsible for. Regardless of the Community Reinvestment Act setting off some prime mortgage crisis and bankers and Wall Street, speculators bundling securities to try to make an extra dollar, leveraging the firm to their hilt in order to maximize profit. All that doesn't matter. George W. Bush was the friggin' president. Hank Paulson knew it was going to happen. He twice let Chris Dodd and Barney Frank bitch him and send him back to the White House and the executive building with his tail between his legs because Bush was too busy killing innocent Iraqis to care about what the hell was going to happen in the domestic economy. So yes, they blame George W. Bush and other Republicans. Can you blame them? You expect them to sit there and do an 8-hour deep dive into policy and how the hell the Community Reinvestment Act, which, by the way, both sides, even though, yes, I mean, it was a Democratic agenda item, both sides pushed it. George W. Bush touted the hell out of this agenda to get everyone to be a homeowner in the United States. Well, what a nice, credible goal, a valiant effort at an honorable goal, but one that was wholly unrealistic. Both sides played that game. Nobody was hit harder than these Hispanics now that support Donald Trump. They lost everything. Probably read Michael Brown's work on it once in a while. They were crushed by it. It literally took away their American dream. So when somebody like Trump comes along and he talks about it in the platform that he talks about, you have people like white working class in the Rust Belt that are like, damn, yeah, immigration and trade, and they destroyed my life. Big Pharma's grip on Congress. Man, the opiate crisis destroyed my entire state. Southeastern Ohio, by the way, once upon a time, Democrat country. Now, thoroughly Trump country. Man, those politicians just let Big Pharma hollow out my entire neighborhood. And nobody gave a damn. Except for this guy. And now, at risk to his own freedom, first definitely risked his own fortune, but his own freedom now. You think they're going to abandon him? And if this little plan succeeds, you think they're just going to what? Vote for Mike Pence or Ron DeSantis, whoever the administrative state stamped with their approval, that one's all right. We, the administrative state, give Ron DeSantis our stamp of approval. Yeah, sure. What a joke. You're going to get 55 to 60 million votes, and you're going to get steamrolled. Millions and millions of people, do you not understand, are going to write this man's name on the side of their ballot. You thought Ross Perot was a thorn in the side of the Republican Party? This is going to crack this party open for at least a decade. Non-whites who are Trumpers will hate the Republican Party for a generation. You and I will be dead before these people come back. Dead. Wake up call. Speaking of which.
You're hearing me right, and let me say this. Today, what is today's date? June 8th? June 8th is the day of insurrection, not January 6th. A weaponized U.S. attorney, a weaponized Attorney General of the United States have unleashed the full force of the United States government against a former president, the leading Republican nominee to take on the existing president. We have never seen anything like this in the United States. We saw it under Stalin. We've seen it in other autocracies, Marxist regimes, fascist regimes, the third world. But they have taken the United States of America and they have dragged us into a hellhole. This is embarrassing. It's humiliating. And I'm going to tell you something. There are tens of millions of us. You have crossed the Rubicon twice, which has never been done. And we will never forgive you. Never, ever. And that's the bottom line. I'm done.
We will never forgive you. And he's not even the extreme of it. Mark Levin is stable compared to how mad these people are going to be. Let's take a quick break and get a word from our sponsor. And then when we come back, we'll take some questions because I'm sure there are a ton of them and it's going to take a while for us to get through them today. All right. Look, folks, authorities fear the extremists are targeting the U.S. power grid. And that's according to Time magazine. If just 9 key substations were to go down, it could knock out power across the country for up to 18 months. That's why you need a solar generator. The new Patriot Power Generator 2000X is portable, but it's powerful enough for your phones, medical devices, even your refrigerator. And right now you can go to 4patriots.com and get one for 10% off if you use the code TPP10 at checkout. Code is for your first purchase, so make sure it's a big one. That's 4patriots.com. Use the promo code TPP10 to get your Patriot Power Generator today. And while we're here, let's tell you about a great deal from our friends at Jam and Bean. Patriots, talking about put everything on the line for your principles and your beliefs. They did during COVID. They did. And they happen to be the finest coffee roasters that have ever pitched People's Pundit to have a slot on the show. So we gave them one. Right now, if you go and get a new subscription, whether it's K-Cups, whatever you like, K-Cups or freshly brewed beans that you like to grind yourself. I like both personally. It's all a matter of time, whether or not I have the time to do it or not. Doesn't matter. Popcorn, whatever. New subscription will get 40% off if you use the promo code TPP40 at checkout right now. Again, you will get 40% off on the new subscription you sign up for right now, but you will still get 10% off on every renewal in each subsequent month just for being a People's Pundit listener, watcher, viewer. Jam and Bean, Jamn, bean.com. Use the promo code TPP40 at checkout. Knock 40%, almost half, right off the jump. And you'll still get 10% off. Patriots in Michigan who fought against the Michigan COVID regime, which Gretchen Whitmer played, politically speaking, well, but still damaged a ton of businesses. A ton of businesses. I want to bring up something real quick. I changed the map so you guys could check it out. Hold on. I changed the map for the national poll, which we saw, basically Trump hovering still around 60 and DeSantis gained a point. Listen, for people, because I saw people go, see, it's a bump. Folks, even the Morning Consult, which is very close to us at this moment, 2 points is not a bump in a sample size this large. When you have, 1,500 per party, over 3,000 sample sizes, even 2,000 sample sizes, your sampling error is reduced to about 2.1%. And the bottom line is that's not a bump because it's within the sampling error. So a bump really needs to be, like, the definition of a bump is outside of the sampling error of the survey compared to the prior same apples to apples poll. So, going from what, 16 to 17.7 is really not a bump. All right. That could be noise. I do want to point out, like I mentioned in reference to PPIC poll, which is California, Trump up like almost 40 points. And he's at, or he's up 30 something points, I think it was. Maybe 30. Let's just call it 30. He's at 50. DeSantis was at like 20. All right. So funny the way California allocates delegates. So you can actually win the popular vote with a plurality, but because you didn't, or I would say the popular statewide vote, you can actually win the most Republican areas. For instance, Bakersfield has a lot more Republicans than the San Francisco does. But if you lose the more populated liberal areas in California, and those districts go to your opponent who wins less of the plurality than you do, you could still run out of California with more delegates than, your opponent who wins less than you do, even if they don't win more votes, they can still come out of California with more delegates. So you could win with like 40%, maybe your opponent gets 30, but they win the congressional districts with a higher population, like blue areas. Well, you can get screwed. All right. That's just the way California works. There is, however, an exception to that rule. And that is if you get 50 plus or 50% of the vote or more. So it wouldn't matter. So the significance of Trump getting 50% in that new poll is a big deal. He was just under, when we took a look at our California subsample, he was just under it. Again, our sampling error is 2%. So he was literally like 59.1. And if you could take a look, we could zoom in a little bit more. If you take a look, where we are here, we have concentrated population centers, obviously, but you do see some blue district support for DeSantis. But for the most part, Trump is doing better again in San Diego, places like that. You can, if you want, sometimes you will see that there is, like for instance, this one. See, there's a scroll bar. Click on it. It will stay. All right. And I'm doing this just to show you guys different ways that you could look at the data and the data is presented. So, before we were using elements, we even had for a day hexagon elements. It helps you understand geographically where people's support is coming from. This one, though, I wanted to give you an ability to really look at specific interviews a little bit more so you can see where this is coming from. Again, yeah, Trump is obviously doing better with older people, but it is the older voter that swings repeatedly back and forth away from Donald Trump and to Ron DeSantis. The young vote is MAGA as hell. Look at this, 23-year-old male Asian, certain to vote, is liberal. And this is the problem because this is in and around Los Angeles. This is a problem for the plan to take out Donald Trump. He's doing too damn well in Los Angeles. You can win the Bay Area, but you still, if you're not going to, let's say that Trump is 45%, and DeSantis wins like the Bay Area, right? That would help him catch a little bit of the delegate, but then Trump carries Los Angeles and surrounding areas. That's going to be a ton of delegates. So that would be game over for that plan. All right. So look at how young MAGA is, though. It's interesting. 31-year-old female, liberal, also Asian, has a post-grad degree. In California, some of the rules, what we see nationally, are being defied. Very non-white, Donald Trump's, in case you haven't been looking, very non-white. Look at this native Hawaiian Pacific Islander, 20 years old, has a high school degree or less, has children, one or more school age, is a veteran of the U.S. military. That gentleman actually had some interesting story, but you know what? I didn't. Personal identifiable information. I did not give people. You need explicit permission to give personal identifiable information away. So some of them I can't. That's statistics for you. And oops, clicking the same one. That's statistics for you. And where's that 37-year-old female? There she is. 37-year-old female like that. There she is. And by the way, now even you can see how the interview was conducted. Was it conducted online or was it conducted through the phone? This is a 37-year-old Hispanic female who is certain to vote, high school GED equivalent, is moderate, employed, working full-time, single, Catholic, suburban area, no military, no kids. Again, very, very, very young, non-white, and dynamic support for Trump. And that's a problem if they vote for the anti-Trump candidates. All right. These are the people I'm specifically showing you because they're the moderates. And if you want to beat Donald Trump, you can't beat him in the conservative lane because he's winning the conservative lane. If you want to beat him, then you have to, the idea is to take this liberal and moderate support away. That's not happening. Hold on one second. My kid's running around with his little game. Yeah, you just can't do it. The numbers aren't there. And if you want to take a state like California, you're going to have to take that. The problem is what's countering the typical ideological lane divide in California. And by the way, this happened in 2016. It just didn't happen as pronounced. What's happening in California is an offsetting of that dynamic by younger, non-white voters who overwhelmingly back Donald Trump. And again, I showed you those specific people because I'm telling you, there's no chance in hell those people would go out and vote for Mike Pence. And highly likely, they're never going to vote for Ron DeSantis. It's not going to happen. You think a 22-year-old African-American female who plans to vote for Donald Trump is going to come out later and vote for Ron DeSantis? You're on crack. You're on crack. It's time to wake up. The man's been indicted. It's time to have a frank conversation about not only the legal implications or what this means for our country, crossing the Rubicon again, but it's time for a very frank, blunt conversation about what this is going to do to the two-party system in this country and what it means for the future of the Republican Party. They are headed to oblivion. That's where this is going. Another one up here, by the way. Let's look at Maine, for instance. Certain to vote, 60 years old, conservative, veteran. Maine is another area. Those people are not coming out, folks. They are not going to vote when the party stepped aside and let the wolves in. They're going to say, I'm just going to step aside the way you did. And I'm just not going to vote. Or they'll vote down ballot if they want to vote for other races. And you will see a whole lot of Sharpies written whether there's a write-in block or not. There was that phenomena, by the way, with Ross Perot even. There were people who went back from the Ross Perot coalition to vote for George W. Bush in 2000. That's how he defied the political wisdom of the time, which was not wisdom. It's very hard to be elected 3 consecutive times in the White House, any party. Al Gore was always facing that uphill battle. But he defied many of those polls, and he defied the political wisdom because the Perot coalition that had vaporized off of the right flank for almost a decade because of his daddy, read my lips, no new taxes. Those people bounced, and they came back for Bush in 2000. And by the way, because he was not true to himself, that's why Bush lost New Hampshire in 2004. But still, there were people, because Pat Buchanan, his campaign collapsed. So there was no reform candidate. It just wasn't a viable candidacy. You got like, I don't even know, 2%, something like less than that, actually. There were people who wrote in Ross Perot. When you're from parts of the neighborhood where I'm from, this shouldn't surprise you or wouldn't surprise you at all. I remember my friend's mother in 2000. Couldn't stand the Bush family. Voted for Ross Perot, not once, but twice. And then was deciding whether or not she was going to write in Mickey Mouse or Ross Perot again in 2000. Ultimately, at the end of the day, she wrote in Ross Perot. Laura's own mother wrote in Mickey Mouse. That's what happens when you're from. And Sean Parnell, by the way, if he was on right now, because this is what we were talking about on Wednesday, I'm sure he's got plenty of stories. Many of them would have voted for Al Gore, though. And in fact, if we would have picked up the map, you would see that Western Pennsylvania, where Trump is now dominant, was Gore country, was Kerry country. Barack Obama did not do horribly there. Yes, he lost some votes in 2012. And that's how, Pennsylvania was 4+ points instead of 10. But he still did respectable for a Democrat. The map did not look that way. It just didn't. Anyway, let's go. I believe one point of the DeSantis campaign is to force Trump to participate in a Republican purity spiral that will hurt him in the general. Well, Jay, that's a fantastic observation, because as Dick Morris last week or whatever it was explained after he did a poll in Iowa with John McLaughlin, DeSantis was trying to outflank Donald Trump on the right over abortion, because, as I have been telling you for a year now, the Iowa caucuses have been dominated by the abortion issue for 4 decades. Roe v. Wade for 4 decades. And trying to get Trump to move to the right on these issues is going to kill him in the general election. It'll kill anybody in the general election. Things DeSantis has already said and done, once they become more scrutinized, is going to really hurt him in the general election. Ironically, from the people who argue about electability. A 6-week abortion ban is not electability. Cutting Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid is not electability. Does it need to be done because our country's headed down, the bankruptcy road? Well, those programs most definitely need to be reformed. But the difference is, in the Rust Belt, if you say, we need to just cut these programs because we're bankrupt, it is not particularly popular. And certainly a lot less popular than, say, a plan that says, you know what, we can't touch it for those people that we promised that are on it right now, but for this age and up, we can have an income test. If you make such and such and above, or you have this many retirement assets and above, then you're not going to get as much back. That's popular, because that's populist. And the Rust Belt is a very populist area. And I saw, by the way, somebody had sent me a comment about such geniuses talking about how populism is dangerous, both on the right and the left, and it has no real ideology, blah, 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 blah. Don't confuse your history of the progressive movement with the populist movements that occurred in the country as well. That tells me you had a public school education, a very liberal left-leaning education, and the progressive era revisionist historians have basically claimed many of the populist movements as their own. And that's just simply not true. There have always been left and right-wing populists. Much of the populist stuff that you heard throughout history, especially during the progressive era and the Gilded era and on, leftists have tried to take credit for, when in fact they really were separate. You had populists like William Jennings Bryan who were on the left. And you had populists like Teddy Roosevelt, who were not really on the left. They're all calling for the same fairness. They just want a different way to get there. Hector, question. Do you feel the GOP party will try to steal the nomination from Trump? Because I feel only death can make Trump lose the primary. I believe that words have power, so I really wish I would have read that a little bit delayed. But yeah, I mean, without a doubt, listen, Hector, if you think this party wants him to be nominated again, it's great. Any more so than they did in 2015 and 16, then, which I'm not saying you do believe that. I mean, just that people have to understand when we're having these questions that, who basically, they need to understand that the party would sacrifice these so-called principles, right? The party would sacrifice the rule of law. The party would sacrifice elements of the republic, the character of the republic, if it meant stopping Donald Trump. So for them to put out these statements pretending they give a damn about oh, well, this is just wrong, but, Trump's entitled to the presumption of innocence, but it's going to be a distraction. They're full of crap. If it meant getting rid of Donald Trump forever, they are allowing this prosecution to go forward. They are. There are a handful of people in Congress who are trying to dig at Joe Biden's corruption. And every time the FBI can no longer hold back them from discovering something, they move on Trump or someone else. They're going after Jim Justice. Why? Because he's 20 points ahead of Joe Manchin. These people, Mike Davis was right. He said it on my show. He said it on War Room earlier today. This most certainly is not your grandfather's Democratic Party. And I'd add that it's not your grandfather's Republican Party either. There are people in the uniparty, in the ruling class, all they care about is power. They don't care what it means for your children or your grandchildren. They don't care. Rich, do you think Trump would benefit from a jury consultant who knows the Miami, Florida area? I do. And in fact, let me get rid of this for a second. And I did want to show you this anyway. There was, by the way, you think that it was a coincidence that they targeted Clarence Thomas the way they did? Or you guys know who's responsible for that region, right? If you bring anything before the court dealing with this region, it goes to Clarence Thomas. So that's why. There have been reports, though, and I wanted to show you this. I didn't see this. See, this is unbelievable. I was just saying how they go after everybody, but there were reports about Trump's legal team being shaken up because they are actually going after his own lawyers. They're not allowing privilege. Folks, they're just trying to burn it down to stop this man. Let me read this, and there's something I have to say about that, by the way. For the purposes of fighting the greatest witch hunt of all time, now moving to Florida courts, I will be represented by Todd Blanche. I know Todd Blanche, Esquire, and a firm to be named later. I want to thank Jim Trusty and John Brownlee, and I'm not saying I know Todd Blanche personally. I know who he is. For their work, but they were up against a very dishonest, corrupt, evil, and sick group of people, the likes of which has not been seen before. We will be announcing additional lawyers in the coming days. When will Joe Biden be indicted for his many crimes against our nation? MAGA, that's Trump's statement. And then after that, I got to bring this up. I have just learned that the thugs from the Department of Injustice will be indicting a wonderful man, Walt Nauta, a member of the U.S. Navy who served proudly with me in the White House, retired as senior chief, and then transitioned into private life as a personal aide. He has done a fantastic job. They're trying to destroy his life like the lives of so many others, hoping that he will say bad things about Trump. He is strong, brave, and a great patriot. The FBI and DOJ are corrupt. Yeah, that's why they also want Mark Meadows to flip, and apparently Mark Meadows is flipping. So when you have the full weight of the government coming down on you, it is sad how many people will crack. As somebody who can tell you, I know what it feels like to have the government come after you to try to get you to flip on someone. I can tell you that I didn't, but it's hard. Your family is your number one priority. And you're thinking, God, they're going to charge me with something. I could do 15 years. I could do more than 15 years. It's easier to crack. And most people do. And it's sad, but it's the truth. And anyway, they had venue. Yeah, Mark Meadows. We were talking about Mark Meadows. Yes. They had venue issues, so that's why they moved it to the Florida courts. It's just honestly outrageous. And I will tell you, I at the end of the day, something like this, and I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to speak to this, but something like this, the 4 lawyers I've spoken with in the last 12 hours all say the same thing. That Jack Smith has been here before. He knows what he's doing. This is a political hit job. He knows it will not survive the Supreme Court. But their goal is to try to basically get it done quickly and then to be able to argue that he has to be removed and then bully governors and legislatures to remove him from the ballot. So basically, South Florida is a liberal mess too, but the people are not so much anymore. And that's the thing. They may have miscalculated here. Miami-Dade will go for Donald Trump in 2024. It's going to happen. He is going to carry Miami-Dade. You know what? I should just shut up. Never mind. I'm honestly going to leave. Let me dovetail though into what I was going to say about this, which is, why was I always so sure that they were going to indict him? One, I have no faith in anything anymore in these institutions. I have no faith in anybody. Everyone's so corrupt now. It's just pathetic. And I just didn't see what they're up against, why they wouldn't be willing to burn it all down in order to stop Donald Trump in some way, shape, or form from winning the White House again. As a numbers guy, looking at the polling that I'm looking at, I've told you this before, but I really got to stress this to you guys. I was telling Laura this last night when the indictment came down. There are numbers that we're seeing in these polls that we just have never seen before for any Republican, period, end of story. Mark Mitchell at Rasmussen had been bringing up, and he got attacked by DeSantis's people, by the way, but he called them suspect demographics. It was an illusion how well Ron DeSantis was doing against Joe Biden. It was. And that the demographics that appeared to be supporting him, but not Trump, were the most suspect of those demographics. And many are just undecided. And at the end of the day, you knew they were going to vote for Joe Biden. So DeSantis went from leading Biden by 6 or 7 in the Rasmussen poll to now being tied at 44. And his favorability rating has cratered. And it is cratering with Republicans. It's cratering in his own state with Republicans, which we knew was going to happen. You know, pollsters like me, like Mark, we all talk, and that's stuff we all been saying this together. Like, wait until DeSantis starts to get some, I don't want to say vetting, but wait until he starts to get some attention. And then also, because his plan really does rely on backstabbing Trump, it relies on these indictments, voters are going to react very negatively to this. And they're going to start to see DeSantis as the stooge, right? Now, when you compare that to Trump leading by what looked to be the same margin, his lead held and DeSantis's lead did not. Okay? Why? Because we knew Trump had universal name recognition. So people telling us things that may even look suspect, you can trust, because these people have not been saying. They didn't say it in 2015. They didn't support him in 2016. They didn't support him all through until 2020. In 2020, they didn't support. The polls did not look the way, the numbers and demographics did not look the way they look now. I have never polled a Republican presidential candidate who showed this kind of strength. And I told Laura last night, I didn't want to say on the air. I said, listen, I'll privately tell you, Laura, and I'm not going to mention certain states, but with numbers like this, this is a victory, an electoral college victory that has to bear out two ways. One way is he wins the states we've all been looking at already. He just wins them by margins. We're all stunned that he's going to win them by. And then he ekes out like Virginia, maybe by a point or 2 points. But generally, you know, North Carolina is 4 points. Florida's like 11. By the way, Florida's not even competitive. We literally have Trump up double digits in Florida. You know, Michigan's like 2 to 4. Wisconsin's more like Trump plus 4 or 5. Pennsylvania's like 2 to 4. Iowa and Ohio are like Trump plus 14 or 12. It's big numbers. That's the only way this popular vote margin could play out. Or a lot of those states are typically in the margins they're in. He just wins Florida by a bigger amount, which he will. Virginia, maybe he still ekes out. The rest of the Rust Belt is closer. But then other states that we really just didn't see fall are going to fall. Like New Hampshire. Minnesota's real close. Again, maybe even does fall. A state like Maine goes. I mean, this kind of strength in a national poll, like you're not going to win some of the red states by any more than you're already winning them. Like Republicans have maxed, demographically speaking, they have maxed out their share in a state like Kentucky, in a state like West Virginia. And he's going to win it by 40 points. I mean, we know that. So where is this popular vote coming from? He's going to win Florida by a much bigger margin, so that'll give us some of it. I do think a state like California, in like Los Angeles and some of the urban areas, he did exceptionally well in last time. Maybe that continues. So he ekes out some more votes in like Chicago, and that helps with the popular vote. But I'll tell you, when you're looking at like Trump plus 4s to Trump plus 7s nationally, that's, you know, and I don't want to bring up some of the states I had told Laura, but that's a shocking night. That's a night where you're like, oh my God, he's really going to carry that state. That's what, there's no other way, because I don't think you're going to see, well, there is another way. The other way is he squeezes out some more votes in Ohio and Iowa, and he squeezes out more votes in Florida. Maybe he ekes out Virginia, but God, it would be close. But I don't see him winning Michigan by 6 points. Like, I just don't see that happening. It could, and maybe that's where it comes from. But when you look regionally, that's not quite it. Yeah, he's doing better in the Rust Belt than he did in 2020. We already know that from the Rust Belt poll. But some of the strength is coming from the Northeast. And some of those states are going to be really, really close. He's probably going to release the poll soon anyway, but I don't want to give away a conversation in confidence, but a pollster, we all know, you all know, good guy in academia. Very, very close result in New York with the governor's race. He basically nailed it. Very close. And the presidency is close. In this, like, single digit close in his poll in New York. That would give you a ton of votes if something like that happened. Now, I don't know how it would. Yeah, but something like Jim, Rhode Island has been really, really close in some of the polls with Trump. Until COVID took him out, Rhode Island got close again. Now, we've seen this with Rhode Island a few times. It happened in 2016 as well. And at the end of the day, Bernie voters, like voters who were for Bernie, did go to Hillary Clinton, and it wasn't particularly close at all, but they had flirted with voting for Trump. They did. Emerson and others, we weren't the only ones to show that. But states like Connecticut would be close. This would happen. So that's the only way a popular vote win for a Republican can happen like that. It's just not. You're not going to turn around that much of the vote in California. Yeah, the Central Valley would go for Trump pretty significantly. That's going to continue the march. He did better. And I don't mean the Central Valley in Bakersfield. I mean like counties like Merced and Stanislaus. Fresno, yeah, of course, there's Republican areas in Fresno. We know that already. Talking about areas where we've been, like David's district, David's old backyard. And that would, by the way, be the only way that John Duarte would survive. Because when these Hispanics come out, they're not going to vote for Republicans unless they're given a reason to. And if you've lost a midterm election by 400 votes when the electorate was white as hell, and turnout was just over half, which is abysmal, it's pathetic, you're not going to win when all those other Democrat-leaning Hispanics come out, unless you give them a reason to. And voting for slave labor is not a reason to. So that's that. And so take your tantrums elsewhere, Mike Garcia, because I'm telling the truth. And I loved, look, I used to praise Mike a lot, but then he attacked me for telling the simple truth, which is that he's in deep trouble. Duarte is in deep trouble. Soon Valadeo will be in deep trouble. They're all going to be in deep trouble. They barely won. Barely. Who does Rich think is in the pool for Trump to choose as a running mate? Neil, I'm going to try to update some of that information. I did, by the way, hear, I don't know how, I don't know the solid truth to it. But I did hear that Lee Zeldin is being considered. That would be, I'm telling you, that kind of would be, that's a smart pick. Lee Zeldin is a smart pick. JD Vance, of course, is a very obvious choice. He's young in the Senate, and it's why would you take away one of your best senators? But he's loyal and solid, and he's MAGA through and through. He's been tested now on numerous issues. He's not failing. He has not failed MAGA. So he's a solid choice. Ron Johnson would be a good pick. Really good pick. That would definitely help. Although, right now, you got to give Republicans the edge in the Senate for right now. However, again, if this fracture does happen, like I'm talking about, then you're making it very likely. I don't know that those people would vote for the Republican Senate. I don't know. I mean, some of them could choose. It depends who their Senate is. Would they take out their anger on a senator that's a good senator for them, that they view to be loyal and authentic? I don't know. We'll see. Rick Scott, he'll be fine. Rick Scott will be fine. Look at his comment. He said the Biden look at his comment in response to the indictment. The whole thing's a total sham from the most corrupt, he said, the most corrupt president in the history of the country. He said, we just saw with our own eyes. The guy is corrupt. $5 million bribe. He sold us out. The day we see it, he sicks the Justice Department on the former president because he's down. Again, I really have to stress that the lead that we're seeing for Trump right now nationally is so solid. It's built upon demographics. Republicans don't win. They don't win them, folks. They don't win divorcees. They don't win the under 30,000. That never happens. That is the food stamp and WIC crowd, the SNAP and WIC crowd. They are an underclass. And yet they are backing Donald Trump. Be devastating. They're going to lose a ton more non-white under 45 voters. Ton of them. Let's put Zeldin up. I just want to show you Zeldin's comment. Oh, that's not Zeldin's comment. Hold on. Let me yeah, that was Truth. That was Trump's old Truth. All right. Let me show Zeldin right here because I think Lee gets it. He says, the greatest irony about the justice system being weaponized to take down a political opponent is that as a result, the odds this evening have only gone up that the 45th president of the United States will be elected as the 47th president of the United States. With the first response being absolutely. Greatest irony is no impeachment of Biden, he says. Garrett also has an interesting comment. Again, there is this immediate response that anything other than the reelection of Donald Trump to the presidency is a loss. In the face of this, it's a loss. And we've seen this in the past with other political leaders. And some of you may remember when I put up, what's it called? What is his, I don't want to screw it up. Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador, the president of Mexico. This happened to him. He made a comeback. There are points in history of a nation. It's just that the U.S. has never had to deal with it because we have been the nation of supposedly the gold standard and the rule of law. We've never been taken down this rabbit hole before of banana republic shit. So we've never faced it. And I think we are going to face it now. And I think the likelihood that the American people, not just, Republicans, I do think they're not going to react to this well. Now, be wary of how people word things with polling. But at the end of the day, it's Donald Trump against Joe Biden, and let me just play for those. I played this a couple of months ago when Alvin Bragg first announced his indictment. We have to play this again. And I have to also say that it's probably good that Trump mixed up. I'm not a lawyer, but it's probably good that he changed up his legal team because we were talking about this on the book club last weekend. They should have been more proactive. I just couldn't believe that his legal team wasn't being more proactive. Like, you needed to operate under the assumption that they are looking at the same numbers I am looking at. So people can take that electability argument and stick it up their asses. They don't know what they're talking about. No Republican has ever been this strong in national polling in our entire record of polling. I've never seen it. All right. At one point, sure. But this is coming from a guy who has been saying the Republican Party will not win the national popular vote for the presidency for a while until something major changes demographically speaking. And what has changed? Trump's appeal to non-white voters and voters that Republicans just don't win. So then that is the case. And now we're kind of in a reverse situation where because Democrats are going to ballot harvest like crazy in certain urban areas, they could potentially lose the popular vote and still win the presidency. They showed us that in 2022. When you don't have those Trump voters in the electorate, they can harvest in just the right number of counties and still prevent you from winning, if you're a Republican, statewide in the states that matter. Arizona, Georgia, they damn near pulled it off in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. This Republicans just got crushed in Michigan. If it's not Donald Trump, you're going to lose the state of Michigan. Take it to the bank. Ron DeSantis doesn't have a prayer in hell of carrying the state of Michigan. So just cut the crap. Again, I'm like usually very nice and try to be, even in the face of all the nonsense. The man's been indicted now on 7 counts in the Espionage Act. I'm right. They're doing this. They're doing this because they see the numbers I see. They can't beat him. They can't beat him. They would have, at this point, they would need to harvest like 85, 90 million ballots there, and they probably will. But again, I'm not sure that'll be enough when you look at how many people tell us they voted for Joe Biden in 20, and they will not vote for him again. They will vote for Donald Trump. Even if we just take the average, which is about 11%. Folks, you're talking about over 8 million votes. And Trump loses less than 2. So the net swing is about 8 million votes. It's crazy. It's like 7.8 million. That's a crazy swing, folks. Crazy swing. And then all of the new 2024 new vote is a Trump vote, which is not normal. New vote is Democrat vote. There's only one other presidential election in modern history where the new voter went for a Republican. That was 2016. And they weren't all new because they were young. They were new because they had quit on the process for so long that they came back. 7 million of them came back into the political process. And so, let me play this clip because this is America's moment for this. And it's sad because Mexico's a narco state. It's run by cartels and corrupt politicians. This is where we're at.
Está declarando el presidente Trump.
President Trump has declared.
Expresidente Trump. Que lo van a detener.
Ex-President Trump has declared that he will be arrested.
Creo que hoy.
I believe today.
Por un asunto.
Because of an issue.
Supuestamente. Como dicen
supposedly.
Presuntamente.
Or as lawyers would say, allegedly.
Sí, amoroso.
Things of love.
Que lo van a detener.
They want to arrest him.
Si fuese así,
if that is the case,
pues todo mundo sabría.
Then the whole world would know.
Porque no nos estamos chupando el dedo.
Because we're not sucking on our thumbs over here.
Que es para que no aparezca en la boleta.
That the real reason they want to arrest him is to remove him from the ballot.
Y si digo esto es porque yo padecí de la fabricación de un delito.
And I say this because I too was a victim of a fabricated crime because they didn't want me to be the candidate.
Y eso es completamente antidemocrático.
And that is completely anti-democratic.
¿Por qué no se le permite al pueblo que sea el que decida?
Because they're not allowing the people to be the ones who decide.
El presidente de Mexico, he's got it. Obrador's got it. And I just can't. How, if the Mexican people get it, got it, I just don't see how they think the American people are too stupid to get it. I just can't see it. Are there always going to be 30% of the country who believes Russia collusion's real and they hate the guy forever? Yeah. But that somewhat, unfavorable, very unfavorable, tells us a lot. At least in the polls that have a good track record and are credible. Mark Penn is a liberal, of course. Rasmussen, Emerson, even ABC News. Very unfavorable, has evaporated. He's -1 overall. That's it. -1 in the Harvard-Harris poll. We are more than that. Maybe we'll do a favorability ourselves. We don't always do it, but we always found a pretty negative rating for Trump during his time, even when he was running for president in 2016, but not in the battleground states, and particularly so not in the Rust Belt. We had gone over that once before with the records of our old polling. So in Florida, in Ohio, in Iowa, he wasn't really that unpopular. And I believe in North Carolina as well. He was still negative, but he wasn't negative like what you saw nationally, which is double digits. In Ohio and Iowa, places like that, Michigan, Pennsylvania, it was negative by only single digits, very mid to low single digits sometimes. All right, so Chris Krobach is a VB pick. I don't know. I think there certainly are more viable options, but I'd understand why you think that for sure. Did I see Pence's speech of, quote, I think this is still a conservative party of small government, unquote. More amazing than them thinking voters will abandon DJT if their delusion that the GWB coalition, George W. Bush coalition, is still alive and well. I can tell you right now that the DeSantis team absolutely does view this as more like an 04 kind of situation. I know that to be the case because before he went over to DeSantis, one of my friends had called to ask about polling data, and they were telling them, and I'm talking about like the Jeff Rowe crew, were telling exactly that DeSantis could recreate a Bush kind of situation. That is a delusion of the highest order. The electorate doesn't look anything like it did in 04. That's number one. Number two, even when we're talking about demographics like the suburban educated woman, it's not as white as it used to be. So the suburban woman, educated woman, is not just even the same kind. So Franklin County, Ohio, no Republican is going to ever perform like George W. Bush did there at this point. That's not the recipe to winning Ohio. You'll lose. It'll be very, very close all over again. We'll be looking at 2-point margins in Ohio. It's insane. And if you think I'm wrong with that, look at Emerson's poll in Iowa. And by the way, it was backed up by somebody else. I want to say, you had Trump ahead by 11, DeSantis ahead by 5. He's only ahead by 5 in Iowa. Good luck. Good luck. And by the way, he was ahead by 5 in Iowa at 45%. Good luck. Question for Rich, though, would be if there's a way for polling to use data from 2020 and 2022 to account for ballot harvesting in states where it existed. Super curious how to account for it in polling. That's a great question, Blake. And the answer at this point, there are some states like Nevada, for instance, where you can weight by vote intention preference vote method. And that would have changed the result to give you a little bit there. Even, by the way, Arizona, we were able to play with the weights, which getting voting method is not a legitimate weight variable. So that's something I should mention. But if you did play with them a little bit, you could get Hobbs ahead by 0.2 percentage point, which is roughly what she won by. But at the end of the day, I'm skeptical of doing that because that's not what caused Kari Lake to lose. the malfunctions and the verifications of ridiculous ballots of what caused Kari Lake to lose. And they're going to just continue to do that. So the only way you can counter that, and that's why Kari Lake is somebody who gets it. She gets it. The only way you can counter that is by removing, again, give me 1 second. Let me do an illustration. This is just random paperwork. All right.
What are you doing?
Random paperwork we're going to pretend is a stack of potential ballots. Okay. If you leave your vote till election day, all right, and something happens on election day, a pipe bursts, water main, okay, or tabulators won't work, all right, draw threes are being stuffed to the brim and no one knows how to account for them. You still have all these ballots that have been left in this pool for Democrats to harvest. Now, if before election day, you harvest this one, maybe this is somebody who would not have voted, shaky whether or not they'll show up on election day, or maybe something happens to them on election day. You've now taken that ballot off the table. Now Democrats only have 6, 7, let's add a couple zeros to it. Now they only have 70,000 that they could harvest. So you take another 10,000, you harvest that, you reduce the pool. Now they only have 60,000 that they could harvest. Now you've taken away another. Now they only have 50,000 in the potential pool that they could harvest. That's the only way to ensure the shenanigans. There's no way to stop the shenanigans, despite what you're hearing from all these people who think they have better technology and that ballot harvesting is a waste of time. There's no way to prevent the shenanigans. Okay, so you caught them. Who are you going to call? Chris Wray? He just indicted Donald Trump. All right? Or Merrick Garland? He just indicted Donald Trump. He allowed Jackson. This is not the independent counsel statute. This is a special counsel. Everyone, Wray, Merrick Garland, and Joe Biden all had to know and okay this indictment. There's literally no authority to call. All you can do is know that they're going to play, they're going to fortify, they're going to engage in shenanigans. So you have to reduce the size of the potential voter pool that they could go out and harvest with a third party. That's all you can do. And you should probably concentrate on those lower propensity people that they later look to. Did they ever request their absentee ballot, or did they request it and not send it back yet? Let's go get it. Deal with them first. Then get your higher propensity voters on the permanent absentee ballot list, so they're constantly just handing them in. And then you can focus your efforts. And again, I'm bringing up Sean Parnell again because we talked about this on Wednesday. That's the only way to do it. And why does Sean agree with me? Because he's from a machine area. He knows, he understands how it works. You got to take those lower propensity people away from them. Get them done off the table. Because you're really going to hurt them when your higher propensity voters are really the only thing that they have left to exploit. There's going to be a lot fewer opportunities for them to exploit them. So, yeah, so I mean, that again, it's a great question, Blake, but I'm skeptical of actually using vote method as a weight variable because, truth be told, in Georgia, Walker +1. That's not bad. We didn't pull the second round, but in the first round, they were separated by a point. That's it. And Walker should have won that race. So I'm happy with that. If I would have messed with the weight variable, I might have gotten a Warnock +3. And that's not what happened. Walker +1 is more accurate than a Warnock +3. That's only 2 points away from the actual result. Warnock +3 would have been, well, 2 points, but in the wrong, it would have given you the wrong impression. It was a very, very close race. If we would have done that in Ohio, we nailed Ohio right on the money. If we would have messed with it in Ohio by vote method, you have to gauge how many people are going to vote by each method by what voters are telling you and using core demographics to weight. That's how you predict how much of the electorate will be vote by mail. Now, as you can moving through the election cycle and get closer and closer, even in the final couple of days or when early vote closes, then you know how much of the electorate is likely going to be early vote. And again, what happened in Arizona is very simple. The election day vote was supposed to be more of the overall electorate. It was less because of the issues preventing people from voting. Kari Lake needed 35 to 45 minutes more of election day vote. That's it. And she would have overtaken Katie Hobbs. That's all. And in fact, again, it took forever to get that recount done. I wonder why. I believe whistleblowers when they come out and say, I've been verifying signatures for years in Maricopa County, and this is not normal. What they did here is not normal. They were avoiding my point in the process because they kept rejecting the signatures. They wanted those signatures to go through. I'm not sure any way to pull for that. I know, and I heard Robert Cahaley from Trafalgar on with Morning with Maria, and he was talking about this issue exactly. Like, we need a way to be able to account for this. I don't like putting my thumb on the scale. I'd rather be a little wrong, but I don't like putting my thumb on the scale. Maybe at some point, what should be done, Blake, is that pollsters should give like 3 different scenarios. Here is what happens if the vote by mail is 80% of it. Here's what happens if vote by mail is 65% of it. Maybe something like that should happen. This way it gives people a lot better understanding of how much it impacts it. Because, at least as of now, or in 2022, the most Democratic crossover, or the most pro-Democrat crossover Republican share of the vote was a vote by mail. But drop-offs and election days were almost no crossover. Republicans were winning 98, 99%. But those who handed their ballots in by mail maybe voted for the Democrat by 11%, 12%. Arizona being a perfect example. So in truth, Kari Lake really didn't lose that much of Republican. She really didn't. The problem is the election day vote was not the size it was expected to be, which would have reduced the overall crossover. So instead of losing 10% of the Republican Party, she would have lost like 6, 7. Because those election day votes were like unanimously Republican. And by the way, same thing goes for the independent margin. If more independents would have been able to vote on election day, it would have closed the gap between her and Hobbs on the independent margin. What effect do you think third parties will have in 2024? Will it generally hurt or help Trump? This time it will help him. In 2016, it helped him, and I argued that, and a lot of people disputed it and said, no, if Ron Johnson wasn't on the ballot, Trump would have carried New Hampshire. He could have even carried New Mexico. No, he wouldn't have. Those candidates being on the ballot absolutely helped him and hurt Hillary Clinton. In 2020, those third-party candidates evaporated, and they went for Joe Biden 3-1. So this time, those very same voters, those who will vote in the two-party race, will back Trump this time. And they do. They've been saying this for a year now. And I don't think they're going to change their mind. But the ones who do vote third party are potential votes for Biden that will not vote for Biden, right? Most definitely they will help him. But they don't help other Republicans. Because those are a lot of Trump voters saying, "Cool, I'm not voting for your replacement drone." Norm, Bush is a fine example why domestic policy should be divested from the president and put into the speaker's helm. You know what, Norm? I've thought a lot about this. I actually think you have a valid point there. The president is too involved in domestic policy. That got us in a lot of trouble. Could a poll question be just as blunt as, if Trump is not allowed on the ballot, will you write his name in? Just to make it crystal clear to regime and their sheep. That's not a bad idea, Snowman. Not a bad idea at all. The only thing is we would be a little bit redundant because we've been asking, listen, if Trump is not on the ballot, what would you, if Trump is not the candidate, what would you do? And then we also say, if DeSantis is not the candidate, what would you do? If Mike Pence is not the candidate, what would you do? So we're taking their choice and saying that. It would mean for Trump voters, we would still ask that. Because I think we need to continue to track that. But then in addition to that, also say if Donald Trump is removed through lawfare, it's, you know what? We'll have to see the size of the questionnaire because, I don't like large, long, lengthy interviews. People abandon it, particularly Trump voters. They don't like him. They like shorter surveys. That's a good question, though. It is. We'll have to see. If it's small enough where I think, hell, let's just add it. We're already adding to the new and national poll that we're going to be doing, which, by the way, support and share the public polling project. It's bigdatapoll.com. Right here. Look, we've done 2. Let me just show you. We have done 2, and I'm trying to keep the cost down. We've done 2 national polls so far without hitting our target. All right. I just wanted to tell you that. This is where we're at right now. You can go to bigdatapoll.com, just scroll to the bottom, or you can go to the actual link, which I'll actually put in the comment sections now. But we've done 2 projects without hitting our mark. And anyone who knows polling knows it's a lot more expensive than 8K. That's just a target we've done because we feel like we can always deal with the rest of the cost, right? However, we've been just kind of shelling out for it. So share it far and wide. Whatever you could do is great. We started asking in other surveys, if you are a Republican, then do you identify more with traditional Republicanism or America First Republicanism? And we're going to be adding that to the national survey as well. So, I mean, Snowman's suggestion is a great suggestion. But we'll just have to see how big, how big the questionnaire is. Has Rich stated what RFK's chances would be in a fair Dem primary? Would it never be? Which it never would be. It's not going to be fair. They're moving South Carolina up because they do not want white progressives and independents to be able to embarrass Joe Biden. They feel that, and they're right, a closed primary that's primarily very largely African American is going to be his best chance of not being embarrassed. If you remember, he got killed in Iowa, he got killed in New Hampshire. It's always hard to defeat an incumbent president, but what Democrats are doing, no debates, moving the calendar around to give Joe Biden easier states to win. It's just tough, guys. It's always tough to beat an incumbent, but they're essentially cutting off RFK's ability to appeal to anyone outside of the conservative Democrat and independent moderate base, because the progressive self-identified or registered Democrat that's eligible to vote in a closed primary, they're backing Joe Biden. And in fact, in Florida was one of Joe Biden's best states that we've polled for him so far, certainly above his national numbers. He's over 60% in Florida because RFK is only at like 8%. He has not been able to break into self-identified Democrats, registered Democrats, and progressives. For amazingly, they're strongly in the camp of Joe Biden right now. And until RFK's base is a more conservative Democrat, whatever Democrat he has, it is a more conservative Democrat. And then also the independent and moderates. He's actually doing really well with them, but it's not enough. It's not enough. He's got to break into the core of the Democratic Party, and he's not been able to do it. His objections to certain vaccines and vaccine policies, his skepticism surrounding vaccines, his skepticism surrounding the lockdowns, his advocacy against the war in Ukraine, which now he's gone back and forth on a couple of times, that's going to hurt him. Because the party that wants, Alan Dershowitz said this morning. He told Steve Bannon how hypocritical Democrats are. And generally, the never Trump people are. Years ago, recently, the Espionage Act was one of their most hated acts. It was never used to go after anybody in the sense that you would think it is. It was used to go after political enemies. Democrats have used it against their political enemies in the past, and they did not want that to happen to them. And lefties, liberals, self-identified so-called liberals and progressives would trash the Espionage Act all the time. Now, all of a sudden, it's their best friggin' friend. Because the Presidential Records Act is not possible to go after Trump with. Why? Because President Trump, any president, is the ultimate arbiter of what is and what is not classified. And talk about the real irony, Lee Zeldin, is that a Secretary of State did far worse. A then vice president did far worse. The president's own vice president, Trump's own vice president, technically did worse because none of these people had the power to declassify or classify at will like a president does. And here's Hillary Clinton under congressional subpoena, destroying evidence, deleting 10,000 emails. Folks, that's 10,000 counts of obstruction. How many cell phones you got to break? 6? Government property to hide what you did? That's 6 additional counts of obstruction. Ironically, the biggest irony of all this is that Hillary Clinton absolutely did violate the Espionage Act. And some of our nation's hated and worst enemies around the globe broke into her system and was able to view it, including a nuclear testing image from North Korea. And they let her go. And they let her go. Yet now they're going to charge Trump with the same act that they let Hillary Clinton skate on. Joe Biden. He will skate. Embarrassed the spy kids that Christie, head of Trump's transition team, underlings, managed to got in and out of the HQ. Let in were mostly from nearby American University, IIRC, the school's called. Doesn't surprise me. By the way, Chris Christie couldn't even lead the congressional redistricting effort. Major failure. And he thinks he should run for president? So you're getting your fat ass kicked in your own home state by 50 points. You completely failed and got your butt whipped by Mark Elias and other Democrats. And when it comes to congressional redistricting, he was in charge of getting Republicans a good map. He blew it. And what, you think that somehow entitles you now to be the president of the United States? This is a cultural issue we have here where mediocrity, if not all-out failure, gives these people an entitlement. What happened to the merit-based system this country was built upon? With this indictment charge, does the indictment kill the idea that there is a reconciliation possibility, meaning Americans can be united without winner of a culture war? Garrett, I actually have been thinking about this a lot. What does this do to this idea that, some people have been pushing, which is whether they like it or not, whether or not you want a national divorce or you don't? We polled not that long ago, I'd have to go back and look, maybe a year and a half ago, about the possibility of a, what do you think the likelihood, how likely is it that the United States will, will head for a second civil war? And then what do you do you want there to be a peaceful resolution? The answers should have terrified us all. And when something like this comes down, it's just one more thing for half of the country to ponder over. Do I really have do I really have a fair say in this country anymore? Do I really believe this country still should be a united nation? Is it really? Because I feel like I'm just a second-class citizen. I don't know. It makes me think that culture war questions start to then become secondary, and then really front-loading the questions about whether or not they even think this is viable to continue. And that's sad, because let's face it, none of this can be done peacefully. As our poll even showed, most people believed there would be a second domestic conflict, a second civil war. A huge chunk of them did not want a peaceful resolution, which means they think it's likely and they want to fight each other. That was terrifying. And then third, the likelihood of there ever being a peaceful resolution was very low. So you add that to the mindset we've already found, it just piles up the negatives, piles up the tragedy. It really does. I don't think either side would let the other side go peacefully. I just don't. Then again, if you believe the Quinnipiac poll, More than half of Democrats wouldn't even fight for their own country if they were in a similar position as the Ukrainians were. Remember that poll? So I don't know how much of a fight it ultimately would be once the conventional forces were out of the way. Which I don't think, again, I don't think the U.S. military could beat their own people. I don't. They couldn't beat the Afghanis. They couldn't beat AQAP. I mean, it's a joke. You think you're going to beat... you think you're going to beat some clandestine guerrilla warfare units in like the swamps of Alabama and Florida? Good luck with that. Because I don't think they can do it. I don't. And that's considering we're not built for a conventional fight. We are built for unconventional fighting. It's just that we're too busy being worried about the origins of white rage instead of actually how to win a conflict these days. I believe one point of the DeSantis campaign is to force Trump to participate. Oh, yeah, I already read that. Absolutely. How do you stop the Uniparty from treating in all the swing states like they did in Arizona in 2022? Like I explained before, you can't stop them. You just have to make sure that their potential pool of exploitable ballots is smaller. 28-year-old white, married, one kid, classical liberal. I won't vote for a deep fake DeSantis. Oh my God. And I'll write in Trump. Only maybe Vivek could win my vote. There's millions of you. Millions. I don't think people are understanding what I'm saying. You do. Ammo is currency. They get it. And by the way, you're exactly that demographic. You're younger, but you're MAGA because you're a classical liberal. And that doesn't jive with the Republican Party or the Democratic Party anymore. A Republican candidate absolutely needs your vote to win. And they're not going to get it. Again, I don't think the media and the ruling class, the political class, were certainly not the leaders of the Republican Party. I don't think they understand what they're doing here. I don't think they understand how bad all of this is going to end for them. Where do any of you think the mobsters went? Politics, became lawyers, and that's a shoveling. That's a profound comment. Going back to what I was saying about, ironically, people like Chris Christie, federal prosecutors that went after the mob, they're the ones who destroyed places like Atlantic City. And he says, where do you think the mob went? They became lawyers, politicians, judges. Certainly their children did. We know that. That's a great point. Truly great point. Let me put this map up just again to explain to you, like, to give a visual representation about how badly this is going to go for everyone. I mean, this is not going to just come. These people are just not going to take it. They're not going to just eat it and take it. It's almost really quite laughable that they think that anyone would think that they would. They're not. Nothing better than ending the week with some embarrassed wisdom and passion. Nothing better than you guys coming here and supporting us when we do it. Could New Mexico get close? Yes, it could. With it, listen, I've always been very skeptical of Trump's ability to take New Mexico. I think, honestly, the older New Mexico gets, the problem with New Mexico for Republicans in general is that it is still relatively young. You got to do better in Santa Fe. You got to do better in areas like that. But if there is a massive realignment with certain ethnicities, Hispanic ethnicities, and that extends out beyond Florida, Texas, Nevada, Arizona, and even places like the Central Valley in California and south of that, then I would not see any reason that New Mexico wouldn't get more so. However, they do have ABQ, which is very young, very liberal because of the university. So it is one of the tougher ones, but it still could be close, yes, because especially if third-party candidates are viable third-party candidates. All right. The extreme sentences for the January 6th folks is to keep MAGA scared as they do their media mind games. Wow, Rich Wood, I got to tell you, I've been immediately thinking about this question of whether or not will the Republican Party abandon Trump after a while. They're trying to scare the Republican Party. They're trying to scare voters. All right. And by the way, the people like the DeSantis people, they're hoping that these indictments scare Republican voters, or at least enough, and I just can't respect that. I'm sorry. I can't, because again, that's putting ambition before the good of the country, but also it's loser think. It's Scott Adams loser think, textbook loser think. And I don't care who the candidate, and people have to really start to understand that I'm not defending Trump and never have when it comes to collusion or anything to this. I am defending the voters that I talk to in my polling every day. And if the vast majority next month were DeSantis voters, I would like to think that I would lend my voice to them as well to convey how they're feeling and what they're, and I know I would because I've been down this road a million times. The problem has always been with Trump's voters is that they never get the attention and the representation that their share of the vote demands. They never get equitable representation. And in truth, they should be the dominant voice in political discourse, from the media to a segment on Fox News. But they're not. They're always handicapped. They're always underrepresented. So it's like when I poll, you would think the way the media covers stuff, the way we have these political discourse in this country, you would think that I'm going to poll and find that this is a fringe movement. Judging by the media and the talking heads and the pundits, and this is a fringe movement. But it's not. It's the majority. And they're trying to scare you. They're trying to scare that majority. And it's definitely the majority of the Republican Party. And they're trying to scare them into submission. And I don't like that. And if this was happening to Bernie Sanders and his movement, I would be defending them too, as I did in both 16 and 20. I leaked the state delegate equivalent stuff to the Bernie campaign. I did it. Whether they wanted to do anything with it or not. But the fact of the matter is, they were misallocating state delegate equivalents and giving them to Pete Buttigieg when they were, in fact, Bernie Sanders SDEs. It's very simple math. They were robbing Bernie of his overwhelming performance, trying to make it look like it was going to be closer than it would, so that they could blunt his momentum before New Hampshire. It was very clear what they were doing. Very clear. Pete Buttigieg actually declared victory based on a fraudulent allocation of SDEs. SDEs are used to allocate state delegates, and that's how you win the caucus in the Democratic side. Hillary Clinton's people built a bogus app. Well, it was not a bogus app. It was an app that they can then use to scapegoat as a reason for why there was all this calamity, and that's not what was happening. The app was part of the plan. There was nothing accidental about what happened with it. It provided them cover for wrongfully allocating SDEs to Pete Buttigieg. And Bernie was, in fact, robbed of that much coveted, needed momentum mojo in a primary, in a nomination contest. And they screwed him again. Problem is, I felt bad for his voters because he did not champion them. His campaign manager wanted to. But Bernie did what he does best. Bend over. Bend over, Bernie. The whole fracture issue hinges on Trump staying in the race, and that's a question mark. I don't think so, Jonathan. I think at the end of the day, if they did push Trump out, then they're going to push these voters out of the electorate. They're going to be mad. So I think it really is both ways. It doesn't matter. At this point, I really do think, and it's not because of what I personally feel. I'm telling you, this is analysis. And it's the most credible take right now. The only way for the Republican Party to survive this and for the nation to survive what is, even the Soviets were not this brazen with political persecutions, and they weren't. They tried to hide it, a lot of it. This is open political persecution of your political enemies. Your opponents. I felt so, Molly Hemingway, I felt so bad for her because I'm like reading her tweet and it's really dawning on her how bad this is. And she says, our completely out of control Department of Justice is destroying the country, meddling in elections, refusing to prosecute political allies, political prosecutions of political opponents. Just a horrific situation we're in right now. Horrific. And Cheryl Atkinson, by the way, replies, who will act? Well, that's really what it comes down to. You can't act on anything. You can't push back. The country can't show its dissatisfaction unless it can only do so with one outcome, and that is the reelection of Donald Trump. That's the only way the party stays together and the country is preserved. Why am I saying this? Other countries. I just played Mexican President Obrador. The country wasn't whole again until he was elected and was victorious. The voters made him victorious over this cartel attempt to take him out until he won. The country was not whole yet. They weren't told, don't you dare try that again. And the fact of the matter is, ever since 2016, the unelected administrative state has been at war with your sovereignty as a voter. And the only way they lose is if Trump is reelected. That's just a fact. That's not an opinion. It's a fact. It's a win for them if anyone else wins. A win for them. And rest assured that nobody will ever stand up for you again in the political process. They'll be too afraid of being persecuted and prosecuted. Nobody with the power to stay true to themselves like Donald Trump has, and the independent resources to be able to not need to be bought off by billionaire donors like everyone else in the race. Let's get real. Ron DeSantis is funded by some of the worst billionaires in the country. The biggest traitors to the Republican agenda, the Republican voter. One of his biggest donors flipped out over the so-called Muslim ban and said, I'm never donating to another Republican again because Donald Trump is a xenophobe and a bigot. His stupid ideas about banning Muslims and building walls. That's Ken Griffin for you. Ron DeSantis, open hand, give me that cash. They're good. Nobody will ever step forward who has the power to stand up on their own convictions and your convictions if voters abandon him. Because they will find no reason. I'll tell you what they'll find. Here's the honest truth. They'll conclude that you're not worth it. They'll conclude that when the going gets tough and they take all this incoming fire, that you're too scared and too weak to continue the fight. Remember when they abandoned Donald Trump? They'll abandon you too. Remember when they abandoned Donald Trump? They'll abandon me too. They didn't have the courage for this fight, so I'm not going to put myself out there to be executed when they don't. believe it enough themselves. And that's the saddest thing. Would Trump run as an independent if Republicans pushed him out? You know, I always said no to that because Trump doesn't like to lose, you know, and at the end of the day, a third party or an independent run is not going to be able to muster enough support to win. It could embarrass the Republican Party, because I think Trump would get more than the Republican vote. I do. I think he would actually get more votes. He would come in second. But at the end of the day, he would still lose, and he doesn't like to lose. So I don't know. I don't know. You know, it's a great question. Can we get a Rhode Island voter analysis episode? I'm dying to see if Trump can pick up Hispanic votes in Providence. You know what? Rhode Island is a good content. It's a good suggestion for content for an episode, an analysis of the state. It absolutely is. That we've done Connecticut, we've done others. Rhode Island is unique. And again, myself and others have showed at one point that Rhode Island has gotten close with Donald Trump as the nominee. At the end of the day, they went back. They returned home. But they flirted with it. And that was the white kind of overlapping moderate that went with Bernie. But there is, as Jim says, there most definitely is opportunity in Providence with non-white voters that Trump could pick up. He would still need significant crossover of others. He would. But yeah, it would be an interesting episode, Jim. I like that idea. All right, let's try to get that on the Laura. Let's remember that. Let's try to get that on. Tatone, white pill for the show 2020 was Biden +4 nationally, and they had to stuff ballots nonstop 24/7 for a week to eke out an electoral college victory by less than 50,000 votes across 3 states. Thank you, Tatone. Thank you. Now imagine if with third parties, Trump wins like 49-42. It's a blowout. Thank you for putting everything in context. And by the way, it's now in my mind, because of the changing demographics in 2020, I always said Biden could win by 4 and still lose the electoral college. And that's true because of the overrepresentation of white working class in the Rust Belt, in the electoral college in general, but in the Rust Belt. Now, I also do think it's possible that Republicans could win the popular vote by about 2 to 3 points and still lose the electoral college. I think it cuts both ways now because of the ballot harvesting operations. Now, we're talking about a Trump +4 or more, and that is, I'm telling you, that's a beat. That's all, folks. What have you heard about Newsom? He's obviously preparing for a run. What makes him think he can beat Biden? I'm not convinced he's preparing for a run yet. We'll see. He does have things in place for in case something happens to Biden. And then he also absolutely is going to run in 28. There's a great article on Politico about that. But if something was to happen, Newsom is most definitely positioning himself as the person who could beat Biden. But I don't know what in Democrat minds, I don't know what it takes. I just don't know what it takes for Democrats to say, that's enough. This guy's done. I just don't know. Trump needs to admit that his red flag comments were wrong, and so was his firearms accessories ban through an unconstitutional executive order. But he doubled down on it last week. At the end of the day, though, Stephen, that's the thing with Trump. He was thinking about red flag laws, and then the NRA sat down and met with him at the White House and talked to him about red flag laws and how they're a slippery slope. I certainly, myself, there are certain things about red flag laws that I would support personally, but they would be abused and it would be a slippery slope. I mean, we just can't trust anyone to enforce the law or administer proper procedures with something like that without abusing them. So at the end of the day, though, he did listen and he pulled back, and he gave him the bump stocks, which, as I understand it, even the NRA just didn't care about. But I understand, the bump stock issue. It wasn't full-blown accessories, because if this is something that bothers me with Rick Scott. After Parkland banning, so-called assault rifles. They're not assault rifles. For 18 to 21-year-olds. Well, that same 18 to 21-year-old is constantly, especially in a state like Florida, constantly encouraged to go down to their local recruiting office and sign up to be a soldier or a sailor or whatever. And they can certainly pick up an assault rifle when they're at boot camp, when they're in the military, when Joe Biden sends them to Afghanistan to fight, to Ukraine to fight for an absolutely stupid war. The truth is, young people are not the predominant cause of gun violence, especially not with the so-called assault rifles. Handguns, outside of suicide by handgun, which is the lion's share of gun deaths in the country each year, handguns in inner cities are the vast majority of the problem with gun deaths. Gang violence, inner city violence. So Rick Scott completely bewildered me and pissed me off with that ban. But you know what? Ron DeSantis did not reverse it. Twice he was asked to reverse it, and he did not. Anthony Sabatini only got what he got out of him in the last session because he's running for president. They still did not undo that damn ban. My son is 13 years old, knows more about how to fire my M10 than most of these friggin' politicians. You can't tell me that my son is not responsible enough. In 18, when he turns 18, they'll want to ship him off to some third world shithole to die over their money laundering schemes and bribery schemes. But he's not allowed to purchase an AR-15 or an M10. It's outrageous. Especially since these kids aren't the problem. They're not the problem. Mental illness and suicides. Why are we killing ourselves at such high rates? And then why are the inner cities killing each other at such a high rate? Some 18-year-old rural suburbanite's got to pay for that. Why? Because the FBI didn't do their job again? Too busy chasing Donald Trump? Missed Parkland? Missed the Pulse nightclub? Hillary Clinton's buddy, by the way. Pulse nightclub shooter, her father was a frequent attender of Clinton rallies. Everybody knew the ties to Islamic extremism. They did nothing. The FBI also did nothing against the Sarnia brothers. Nothing. Even though Russia basically handed us the intelligence on a silver platter. That's right, Green Dog. White, Green Good. We still don't know what happened in Vegas. We still don't have a motive. You think they don't have a motive? FBI is a criminal organization. Criminal organization. Babyface Nelson is not running around robbing banks anymore. The FBI has run its course. Its purpose has expired. And even when it was there, its purpose, they weren't even fulfilling it. Elliot Ness had to be tapped at the Treasury Department, handpick his own Treasury agents because the FBI was so corrupt. They couldn't trust them to go after Al Capone without taking bribes themselves. The above reproach G-Man. What a myth. What a load. Nothing more dangerous than a privileged, overeducated, credentialed scumbag with a badge and a gun. And that's that. Damn, it's 2:15. So this Sunday is not Father's Day. So we will be having the book club, The Ideological Origins of the American Revolution. I wonder how they would feel about this. You raise Jefferson from the dead and tell him what's going on and how we got into this. He'd probably turn, vomit, and say, put me back in my grave. All this was for nothing. If you raised Washington, I bet you he would just look at you and say, how'd you lose the hand of providence? What did you do so wrong that God has turned his back on you? Where did you go wrong? He's like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know, George. I don't really know where to start. I mean, we did lie about and halfway start 2 world wars. There's that. We killed a bunch of Vietnamese over a fake Gulf of Tonkin incident. We marched the Lusitania into unfriendly waters because we wanted to join a global conflict. We lied about WMDs in Iraq and killed a bunch of innocent people. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know where to start. Barack Obama vaporized an American citizen without a trial. Killed his 14-year-old brother and cousin while we were at it. Then there was the 40 years when we killed 500,000 to 1 million babies every year. Wow. What else? Libya, Syria, right? I don't know. I don't know, George. I don't really know where to start. Sorry. Sunday, Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or Eastern Daylight Time, sorry. Ideological Origins of the American Revolution. We'll drop it in the community section on YouTube for members. Also, by the way, if you guys want to make the jump over to locals, I did a couple weeks ago. I'll do it again. I gave for YouTube members, people who are paid members on YouTube, I give you a promo code to basically grandfather you in, because the cost of locals is going to go up a little bit, not a lot. Scott Adams, all these other guys. Truth is, we have one of the biggest locals communities out there, and I'm still the only one who's remained at the original amount. But we offer, unlike so many others, the products and the content that we offer costs a lot of money. Polling costs a lot of money. Having these tools costs a lot of money. So we are going to increase it, not as much as Viva or Barnes or Adams, but a little bit. That promo code will grandfather you in before we do that. And I'm trying to let you know when we're going to do it, because I got to look and check. It's close. It's getting close. Maybe like 20 days away or something. That'll grandfather you in, and then also take away the expense for 2 months. So it's like taking away what you may have paid for YouTube for the month already. And then that gives you ability to jump over to locals and kind of pick it up from there. Now, if you want to have both and stay on both, you're more than welcome. But we're trying to obviously make it so you don't really get double charged. All right. What else? I think that's just about it. Right, Laura? I don't have any other announcements at the moment to make. Share the public polling project far and wide. Contribute if you can. We'd really appreciate it. What else, Laura?
And possibly an interview later for Epoch. But other than that, they air later. So.
And we would share it anyway.
Yeah,
right?
We'll share it when it comes out. Yeah, just have a great weekend. And remember that every day is not given, it's a blessing. So
that's right.
Have a blessed weekend, y'all.
Well put, Laura. Well put. All right, folks. Thanks as always. And if you're not already, if you're not a member of either the YouTube or locals, we'd love for you to go ahead and join the locals community at People's Pundit. You can sign up as a member first and not a supporter, which you're more than welcome to do. And hopefully, if you like it, you stay and you enjoy the conversation, you'll become a supporter. All right. So don't forget, people'spundit.locals.com. people'spundit.locals.com. All the other links are in the description below, and we will see you on Sunday. Most of you, I imagine, or a lot of you, will see you on Sunday. And then the rest we will see on Monday for another episode of Inside the Numbers. Although there may be a What Are the Odds coming up soon, but I don't know yet. Stay tuned. And if that does happen, instead of doing Inside the Numbers at noon, it would always be What Are the Odds at 2 Mondays. All right, folks. All the best. Thanks for watching.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends, and spread a little love just for a little fun. I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette.